Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ben Stewart Podcast. Have a really interesting guest for you today. It's somebody that I've actually interviewed before back in the day when I was working at Gaia. His name is Glenn Streeter. There's so much about this guy that would be awesome to dive into, but I'm just going to read from his bio on energymedfit.com. With a degree in exercise physiology, emphasizing sports medicine, Glenn has been practicing sports physiology and energy medicine for over 30 years. His clients include world champion and national caliber athletes from a variety of disciplines, as well as celebrities. An avid off-road motorcycle and mountain bike racer, Glenn knows the value of energy medicine and pulsed electromagnetic field, PEMF, therapy. If you go to his website, you'll see that he's been advancing the holistic health field for over 30 years. But I'm here to tell you, man, that is just the beginning of where the conversation goes with this guy. I think I spent the better part of an hour chatting with him this morning, and it could just go on and on and on because this guy is very tuned into what's happening in the world today. So without further ado, let's get into it on the Ben Stewart Podcast. And we are back. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Great to be with you, Ben.
Yeah, Gordo up here, taking care of everything from behind the scenes.
Good to see you guys.
All right. Man, there's so much we could get into, so I was really trying to organize my thoughts. How do I want to dive into this? And really what I think would be really interesting is just kind of taking a look at like your story. I gave the nuts and bolts of what you could find on energymedfit.com. But I would really love to know your practice. I want to understand it a little bit better for the audience to know, A, where you're based, what's going on where you're based right now. How have you been in the past helping people with their health, and how might that have changed in the past year and a half?
Well, part of the reason the guy wanted me on is I was born dead, and I was a sick kid up until I was 14 when I bought a juicer with my paper route money and started weight training with a former professional football player on my paper route. And by age 21, I was trying out for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I'm really blessed to have had a loving family and a lot of support, and just kind of a fluke, very healthy family. I don't know why I was 3.5 pounds at birth and wasn't supposed to make it, but it was an interesting journey and it taught me a lot. And in college, I had some really great mentors, and following college, being here in Boulder, we had what's called ICEAM, which is the International Society for Energy Medicine, that met 5 minutes from my house. So for the last 25 years, I've been rubbing shoulders with some of the top scientists from Russia and Germany and France and South America and America, of course. And it's just been an amazing journey as far as focusing on regeneration, because I was so frustrated with the brilliance of Western medicine for emergency care and how they saved my life so many times. But yet with chronic care, they just drop the ball. And worse than that, they poison people. So the focus on regeneration really took me to Boulder, of course, and we've had wizard parties the last 25 years of some amazing folks that would come and share their technologies and information, and people like Jay Widener and people like George Norrie's producer, Sid Goldberg, and people like that, laser folks, folks who have an original Rife machine. Yeah, it's been amazing, but I'm disappointed in what's happened since the scamdemic, and Boulder has really turned into a group of isolated folks, and gathering is just not happening as much anymore, and maybe it's time to move on. Luckily, what we do is mobile, even though we do have an office.
Yeah, I would really like for the audience to better understand energy medicine. I know that there's a demographic of people out there that when they hear energy medicine, they're probably thinking Reiki.
Right.
And I would love for you to make a distinction there and to help us understand, because you mentioned Rife machines, and hopefully, our audience understands who Royal Raymond Rife is, but maybe just dive a little bit deeper into energy medicine and what caught your eye about it.
Well, energy medicine's been with us since the beginning. Of course, people have been doing hands-on healing, and that kind of became corporatized, if you will, with Reiki, which is a brilliant modality in its own right.
Hmm.
But our focus is primarily on device-oriented energy medicine, simply because it's reproducible. If you have a hungover Reiki practitioner, it might not be such a great experience. Uh, Plus, there's a certain threshold that we need to cross in order for certain tissues to really respond consistently. So that's what kind of led me to the device thing. Plus, my grandfather was a executive with Westinghouse, and when I was growing up, I was playing with oscilloscopes and ham radios, and built a Geiger counter with my grandfather and radios. And so I've always had this fascination with biology and technology, and it just was a perfect fit, especially with my own healing journey and watching things resolve almost overnight, depending on the problem with some of these higher powered energy medicine involvements like PEMF.
Yeah, I really want to dive into that one, PEMF. So, like, explain that, and then maybe talk about. We were talking about earlier. You say your tibia broke.
Yeah, I shattered my tibia. It's called a tibial plateau fracture right below the
Tibia.
kneecap when I was skiing this winter. And about 2 months ahead of schedule because of the PEMF. And I was off the pain meds in 3 weeks, got off them in one day. That's
You
thanks to CBD and THC as well.
Perfect. And you had one of those devices when I interviewed you at Gaia.
Uh-huh.
Is that so? Explain that. Just explain a little bit about the PEMF technology and like maybe how it works a little bit and how it could potentially put you 2 months ahead of healing schedule.
Mm-hmm. Um, so the premise is when we sit around the oak table with these folks from Europe and these wizard parties, we were always trying to get to biological imperatives. And one of the biological imperatives is the Schumann wave. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
So the Schumann wave technically is 7.84 hertz. It may have changed by now, but we're all deficient in the intensity of the Schumann wave. Right now, it's about 0.5 Gauss. Gauss is a measurement of magnetic horsepower. So when we start getting up in the 150 to 1500 Gauss range, that's when some serious healing can happen to any tissue. So what we're doing is we're artificially recreating the Schumann wave. So we can think of it as music in one way. We can also think of it as a magnetic wave. And the effect on the body is a 400% increase in stem cells in about 15 minutes. So it makes it the most regenerative device that we have in our quiver.
Wait a minute. Say that one more time. What kind of an increase in stem cells, and maybe tease
400,
that out.
400% increase in stem cell proliferation in the area in 15 minutes.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And obviously, stem cell therapy is ridiculously priced, very effective, but ridiculously priced. So this seems like a much, at least more accessible way for stem cell production. So are you saying stem cells in the location that the PEMF is being used?
Well, a number of stem cells are free floating in the blood looking for a job to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of a siren call to bring them to the particular area that we're treating at the time. But also we get increases in blood flow, lymphatic drainage, tissue extensibility, water coming to the area. Pretty much everything is positive. So regardless of the tissue, it will respond positively to PEMF.
regardless of the
And
tissue.
some examples, we've healed sprained ankles, moderate sprains, in about 3 hours in the office, where people walk out, play frisbee that afternoon. We've healed stage 4 liver cancer in a patient with who was an alcoholic, and that was about 3 months, and then the liver is about 80% within normal parameters now. So really exciting when we can change people's lives like that.
So you're saying, I'm curious, you said a number of different tissues. Would that include, like, have there been anything on teeth? Just curious, like damage to teeth with PEMF being able to, I don't know, bring it back into health.
Well, we've healed a broken bone in a wrist in 11 days before, with a professional athlete. There are 7,000 studies on PubMed regarding PEMF, most of them glaringly positive. I don't have personal experience with the teeth, but we could check the studies.
Yeah, you mentioned something very interesting. Man, I think it was on Regina Meredith's show, Open Minds on Gaia, where you referred to, and this is when it really started turning me on as far as, like, the work that you get into and the way you view the body. But you said something about the teeth as being fiber optic fuse boxes.
That's right.
Could you tease that out for us a bit?
Okay, so as the baby is being formed, if you can imagine the cells continuing to divide, there are 3 tubes that are created in the baby. One is the digestive tract, one is the nervous system, and then the other is the skin. So the teeth are actually an outgrowth of the organs. So let's say, for example, we have a root canal or a tooth that's severely infected that's on the heart meridian. That can cause a heart attack, could cause high blood pressure, could cause anxiety, heartburn, a whole bunch of symptoms. But when we heal the tooth or pull it and then heal the socket, that goes away, because that tooth is actually a fuse in a fiber optic network that runs through the whole body, thousands of miles of fascia and the meridian system. If folks want to dig deeper, they can look up BONGHAM, Bongham ducts, DUCTS, on YouTube. So you can see with radioactive dye, the instant that a needle is inserted into the toe, the kidney begins to respond positively and increases in blood flow, relaxation, for example.
Could you spell that one more time?
BONGHAM, Bongham ducts, DUCTS. So these are the spots where the needle would be placed, and then the acupuncture meridian, the highway, if you will, the traffic jam would be opened up. It's really fascinating.
You mentioned fascia. I've been studying fascia for quite some time, and also, just understanding functional movement and the importance of our gait cycle. There was, in my studies, there's this woman, Frankie Burgett, out of, I think it's Houston or Austin, Texas, but either way, she is a body worker, and she started noticing that the sphenoid bone inside the skull will not do its flexing or its flapping motion. It's the most complex bone inside the body. But if your gait cycle is not, let's just say, functional, that it can actually seize the motion of the sphenoid bone, and it doesn't give a milking or a palpitating effect to the pituitary and pineal complex, causing a lot of downstream effects. So the fascia is really interesting because in healthy fascia, it looks very fiber optic. In unhealthy fascia, it loses its translucent, it starts turning brown, really tacky. That comes from improper diet, improper movement, and everything like that. So I find it really interesting. That's where I thought you might have gone with it when you were calling the teeth the fiber optic fuse box. And so I would be really interested to find out about the PEMF machine potentially healing teeth. Are there any, before we move on, are there any any other anecdotes that you care to mention that, probably, like, let's say you weren't expecting the PEMF to be able to handle or create a positive impact on?
Well, we work with animals as well. And there was a horse named Bubba who hadn't gone potty in about 3 weeks. And he was not happy. And we spent a couple of hours with the PEMF on his belly. And he ran out into the field and did his thing and came back bucking and running and all happy because he was a new man. And he started licking my face and hit me with his tail. And it was it was an interesting experience.
That's wild.
There's no placebo effect with the critters, right?
No, especially not a horse. They have such a strong heart field. Heart Math did a lot of studies saying that being next to a horse can actually correct some of like the aberrant electromagnetic frequencies from our own hearts. So there's some kind of therapy there. And horses, I mean, they're so majestic, powerful, and magical, man. I'm so glad to hear that. So we were talking about this just beforehand. Last time we met, actually, we took a hike up. I forget exactly where we were, just outside of Boulder, Flagstaff. Okay, and then you gave me a bottle of the carbon 60, so the C60 that you sell there. And I remember the almost immediate impact that it had on me. But I would love for you to tease this out, because this is something that even Pete Evans has asked me to make a film on, the C60 molecule. What is it? Why should we know about it? And we'll get into a little bit more, because apparently there are some out there that aren't as some products out there that aren't as legit. What can we look for, and why is C60 so important?
Well, I'm grateful that I was taught by some of the originators who brought this to the fore, and we actually make it in a lab here in town. So what the molecule is obviously carbon, but it's 60 sides, so it looks like a 60-sided soccer ball. And the unique properties of it are that it's 200 times more powerful than vitamin C as an antioxidant, but it's also a chelator, and it pulls 3,000 bad guys out of the body. So, but it doesn't stay in the body, and it doesn't actually belong in the body. It's not natural, but it's not toxic either. It's kind of an interesting situation. It's kind of like there was actually a movie in the 70s where folks would take a journey into the body in their little spaceship. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but that's what I envision when I see the carbon nanobots going through the body and looking for a job to do, looking for a place to donate electrons when it's low, which is what vitamin C does as well. That's what antioxidants are. They're electron donors, right? But it also is a chelator, so those holes in the soccer ball actually grab onto nickel, cadmium, lead, mercury, radioactive materials, and pull those out of the body. And what we found with the research is that doing a continual detox is actually superior to waiting and kind of like trying to get ready for your wedding, lose 20 pounds for your wedding, and doing these detoxes, and which I'm not against. If someone's sick, they need to take a hard look at that. But for folks who are relatively healthy, this daily detox concept is really, really beneficial, because some of these things can take years to get out of the body.
Yeah. So then, like, I've heard from a few people specifically. I'm forgetting exactly what it is, because it's like a buckyball almost, right?
It is a buckyball.
Okay, so I heard that it's also resistant, unlike most other molecules. It's resistant to high impact, because of its structure, it can actually absorb impact rather than being so rigid that it breaks apart. Does that make any sense, or have you heard that?
Oh, yeah. Well, it started out as an industrial lubricant, which is kind of interesting that we're talking about it as an anti-aging supplement. It can actually increase the lifespan of engines and moving parts dramatically because of this ability not to deform. So if you imagine metal in an engine, and if you could look at it with a microscope, you could see all these tiny little indentations rather than a completely smooth surface. That's what causes wear. So the carbon actually fills in those potholes, so to speak, and creates a surface that's very, very smooth and microscopically consistent.
Interesting. Yeah, that's real interesting. You also have carbon. I remember seeing that while I was making that film with Pete Evans called The Magic Plant, and thinking I want to understand the synergy there. So that specific product, could you explain to us like what someone would take that for? Carbon. It's the
So
C60 and
that's my creation. We were the first to synthesize organic spagyric CBD with carbon 60. And at that point, it was the most anti-inflammatory product that we'd tested in the laboratory and with clients. So the benefit here is you're getting all of that antioxidant capability of both the CBD and the carbon 60, but you're getting the emotional component from the CBD. Even though C60 does have a nice emotional component in terms of stabilizing mood, helping us feel relaxed and not aggravated. And the CBD just works perfectly with that. It's a wonderful synergy.
So you're based right now. You're based in Boulder, Colorado, and you said you're mobile, so that could change here in the near future. But I'm wondering, like, when people pop in to your place, usually I would imagine they're coming in with something specific that they're looking to remedy. How do you take them through? Because the Nuvision is something I also want to get into, and maybe not right now, but like, how do you take people through a process of like deepening their understanding of what it is that they might be dealing with to begin with?
Right. Well, we can't manage what we don't measure. And unfortunately, most of my colleagues are not measuring the right parameters. The beauty of the Nuvision scan is it's 130,000 items using holographic machine learning. You could call it AI, but it's technically not AI. But uncannily accurate, and gives us a picture of what we're dealing with in terms of organ function, heavy metals, infectious agents, dental issues, and even there's an emotional component. In fact, I just ran a scan recently, and it came up with let me read this word for you. Bathmophobia, fear of stairs or steep slopes.
What?
Right? This is my scan. So I just shattered my leg in February on a steep ski slope, and it was able to pick up that subtle angle, the fact that I'm still harboring this fear from the injury. So pretty in depth, it's a deep dive. It's the ultimate biohack, frankly, along with what's called heart rate variability, which Heart Math Institute utilizes now. So the heart rate variability is the gold standard test for the nervous system, and it tests what happens between the heartbeats, which is much more important than what happens with the heartbeat. That way we can look at the human nervous system and determine whether it's going or whether it's going right?
Right.
Someone who's stuck in all the time is using up all this vital energy deep within their subconscious to deal with whatever that it is they're dealing with, whether it's an infection or some trauma in the past or emotional things. We need to get to in order to be healthy long term. But then the Nuvision is a deeper dive into that. Again, with this large amount of items. So then once we get that information, then the device will tell us what supplements are harmonizing with this person, which organs need to be focused on, and for athletes, whether their training is beneficial or not, and how to really optimize that.
So with Nuvision, Nuvision is not corrective, it's diagnostic. correct?
Well, we don't use the D word.
Yeah. Okay. So
We detect and we correct.
there you go. There you go.
But
How
there is a
ridiculous.
correction component to the Nuvision.
Okay.
Mhm.
So explain that to me because I haven't heard of that.
Okay, so like let's say I did a scan on Jane Doe and she showed up with needing certain homeopathics and certain supplements. We can actually click on those and broadcast them to her in fifth dimensional subspace. And sounds crazy, but we've actually seen changes in blood work in the laboratory with a Jane Doe petri dish, for example, when we broadcast specifically to that individual's blood in the petri dish.
So we're talking vibratory.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like Fluffy. Do you know FLFE?
No.
So Fluffy's a new technology that is essentially exactly what I explained. Excuse me. People pay them $10 a month, I think, $20 a month, and it will broadcast a protective frequency for you for EMFs to cleanse the home energetically, cleanse the body, and just basically put a protection around. A lot of folks say that they can feel it.
Is it a device that's in home or is it broadcasted remotely?
No, you pay a subscription and they broadcast to you.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So this is kind of getting into all this 5D medicine, right?
Yeah. Which honestly, I mean, like, yeah, there are still some people that have some reservations and some blocks towards that. And we're living in a world where most people have outsourced their thinking to, sanctioned authority for the most part. But, I think the next generation conversation we're going to be having around medicine, if you listen to all of the leading researchers out there, is vibratory. Selenatosoy, she doesn't work directly in the psychedelic community, but I met her at MAPS, and she was speaking about using the Laplacian or the Laplace equation to image the brain differently than an fMRI. All the other different imaging methods. It's using the Laplace equation, and it also shows like harmonics. So it's brain harmonics, or they call it the connectome. And she was basically saying that, LSD, you take it and it actually opens up the repertoire of how the brain can communicate amongst itself and how it can access outside stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing, so that was the psychedelic bit of it. But she was basically saying at the end of her thesis, this to me is absolute proof that the future of medicine is no longer in chemicals, but in vibratory prescriptions. It could simply be broadcast remotely. So that really, I'm talking like there are a whole class of people speaking about the same exact thing as selenatosoy that are really backing up what you're saying, but these aren't people that are anywhere outside of academia. So they're smack dab in the middle of it. They're just being like the trailblazers of those within that country club, saying, no, this is a real thing, and this is the next frontier that we need to start looking at. And you've been doing this for how long?
35 years now.
Right. How has it changed? I would love to get like a scope of how it's changed from 35 years ago to today, and also maybe some of the things that people 35 years ago were talking about that only today is being taken seriously.
Well, before we move on with that, MAPS has done some great work. They're here in Boulder, maybe in other places as well, but we've been doing a lot of experimenting for the last 20 years, maybe with microdosing.
Mm-hmm.
And seen tremendous changes with depression, anxiety, alcoholism, caffeine addiction, laziness, candida, if you can believe it, right? We found that the psilocybin molecule, when taken in very small doses, can actually begin to inhibit the candida growth because it's a proper fungus,
Wow.
the psilocybin, right? It can instantly change cravings, instantly change the mood, pain relief. So that's one of the biggest things that's changed, actually, is seeing marijuana and some of these other what have been called street drugs as healing modalities, rather than something to be abused at a rave,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, and they're plants. I mean, like
Sure.
what we're really talking about is we've demonized things that grow out of the ground and said only what comes from a lab, is for your health. The rest of it is drugs, and you should feel shame if you take it, which is a terrible setting to place on whole cultures that are experimenting with these things. That's a conversation for another time. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Even the small amounts of it can start correcting some of those things.
And I would encourage folks to stay with the natural products before they start looking at the synthetics like acid or MDA, MDMA.
Mm-hmm.
The mushrooms and the edible marijuana tinctures are very, very powerful, like Rick Simpson oil, things like that, especially in combination with cannacarbon, so that the THC doesn't get out of control, because the THC overdose on an edible can be an unpleasant experience.
Absolutely. So how does is it the CBD that helps quell that?
Yeah, it's interesting that they're synergistic and they help each other in terms of potency.
Mm-hmm.
But the CBD is also an attenuator, and so it can bring down someone from a scary THC place or a scary acid or another drug place. Word got out here a long time ago, and that I was here, and so after some of the Grateful Dead shows, I'd get people on my porch at 2:00 in the morning saying they didn't want to go to the ER because they just took 3 or 4 tabs of acid, and can I help them? Without having the embarrassment or the police involved at the hospital.
Oh, the Grateful Dead, man, they changed so many people's lives. So the original question, 35 years ago,
right?
What were the conversations like?
Okay,
And
so, cutting edge back then would be Rife machines. Certainly, there's been a lot of phony Rife stuff, but even back then, there were quality Rife devices if you knew what to look for. There was what was called the Papini machine, if folks want to look that up, PAPIMI. That was the original PEMF machine, which was, it weighed about 200 pounds and needed a trailer to drag around, and it was expensive and crude, but it worked quite well. Lakovsky had the multi-wave oscillator, but these things were kind of arcane, expensive, and difficult to operate. We've played with a lot of them, but part of the beauty of the technological age is the miniaturization of these things and also the refinement of the output signal. So rather than something crude like a diesel engine or a railroad, train, it's more like a high quality stereo. And things have gone from, $100,000 for a PEMF machine to, $4,500 for a clinical quality version now. So that's been very, very powerful. And then the testing, of course, with the Nuvision, we didn't have anything like that.
Yeah.
We were still reliant on blood work and dark field microscopy.
Like for the audience, I know these are a lot of new terms and everything like that, but when you're talking about Rife technology, would that be a basis of the PEMF?
No, they're apples and oranges.
Okay, all right.
So the Rife technology originally was a radio frequency that would actually heal in an 8 to 10 mile radius from his laboratory. Everyone with diabetes, for example, when he was running a diabetes frequency.
Wow.
But the Rife machine is predominantly a killing machine meant to kill staph, strep, pneumonia, cancer, right? It can have regenerative qualities, but you have to be very specific with the frequencies. The beauty of PEMF is that it's regenerative in totality. It's not trying to kill anything. It is killing things because it's alkalizing the body. And so anything that's acidic won't be able to stick around. But in terms of use for the client, it's much, much easier to deal with PEMF than Rife technology, which is still kind of esoteric.
Yeah. So where we're at with PEMF technology, do you feel like we've pretty much well scratched the surface, or do you feel like there's a lot of evolution still to come with that?
We're still refining the signals. Um, I talked to Dr. Bob Dennis. If folks want to look him up, he's a NASA scientist who was given millions of dollars to study PEMF. So really being able to optimize what's called power, amplitude, waveform, and frequency. These are PAF. These are the 4 parameters that we have to deal with. There's actually 10, but 4 for our discussions. So there's always room for improvement there, but we're in the ballpark and we're in the bell curve. I'm interested in things like the med bed that Jared Rand is talking about, trying to get some corroboration on whether this is for real or whether it's hopium.
What's medbed?
Do you remember the movie Elysium?
Yeah, with Matt Damon.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the woman with the sick daughter, her entire goal in her life was to get this child into the med bed, which was on the spaceship.
yeah.
Right? So rather than just PEMF, my guess is the med bed is utilizing laser therapies, musical harmonic technologies, like Dr. Steve Schwartz is doing with the Vibe. The Vibe bed, which is a bed that you lay in and actually have music played through your body with a light show. It's an amazing experience. It's like going to Disneyland.
I've done that, and it really is. It's psychedelic in a way. It can change the way you're even feeling, as far as, like, you know how psychedelics, they'll show up with something in your jaw and your teeth and your gut. I had that. There was a woman named Dr. Nora Gedgaudas. She was the author of Primal Fat Burner, and she put me on one of those beds. And for me, it amped me up. And then there's this musician that was there, Nako and Medicine for the People. He went in right after me, and he just passed out because his body needed it. So it was interesting how it did something different for both of us. So personal testimony there.
For sure.
There's something going on with that.
Well, if folks want to study cymatics, I don't know if you've discussed this on the show before, but just simply go to YouTube and type in CYMATICS. So imagine a plate that's a stainless steel plate where you place salt on it. The plate is a frequency generator, and as the frequencies change, the shapes change. It's absolutely magnificent to watch, because when you look at that and you understand that dis-ease is the salt on the plate looking like sand on a beach. But then when it becomes to look like a tortoise shell or the back of a snake or a nautilus or something that's cohesive and geometrically square and magnificent, that's health. And there's a reason why our organs are called organs, like a church organ.
Yeah.
Is because they each have a frequency, and we know what that is, and we can introduce that harmonizing frequency and heal these things. It's so much more elegant than trying to drug everything.
Well, totally. I mean, and this is also showing that we are a symphony. Like,
Yes.
we are a symphony in action. And I constantly try to use better words. Talking about what do we need more of in the world? It's harmony. And a lot of that is using our voice. And I'm not talking about harmonizing like singing, but I'm also not talking about that, because we have a voice for a reason. And when we use it with intention, speaking our own truth, it rings differently. People can tell. It shows up in our face. It lights us up when we're speaking our own truth. And there's something harmonic about that. And I really do feel like you mentioned cymatics. I made the film Climatica years ago. And
the water leaks around the
you know, and so no, it's all good. Climatica is a film that I made, back in 2009. That is the Greek term for cymatics. And the reason why I said it that way is because I've always been a musician, and I've always understood that there's something about music and the way that it can change you. Music, if it hits right, it can change you. And then the words become kind of almost like self-fulfilling prophecies if you're in that hypnagogic state. So what we're seeing here on the screen is 345 hertz.
There you go.
And that's the shape that it creates. And as the frequency increases, you'll notice these moments of chaos and then all of a sudden it'll come into a higher form, a higher complexity. And so we're not seeing the chaos in between. We're just seeing it well, kind of like when he's throwing the salt all over it, that's chaos, and it comes into harmony. But right there, you see how it went back to chaos so it could reorganize itself. I almost feel like this is what's happening to the planet right now. And you were talking
Absolutely.
about the Schumann resonance. I feel like we are in that stage in between a lower order and a higher order, and the geometry is changing, and it feels like there's chaos. And in many respects, there is chaos, and there are perpetrators, but there also seems to be something deeper and higher, and let's just say more esoteric, that's going on here, that I feel like a lot of the perpetrators that we're talking about are trying to hijack, but it's not necessarily something that they're capable of hijacking. All they're able to do is keep people in a state where we consent to and willingly give up our authority. We prefer the nanny state.
Mm.
And so now we're kind of getting into like what's actually happening on the planet right now. And I would love to, man, you and I have had some great conversations before. I would love to hear your, in a nutshell, what is this great event that the world is facing right now?
Well, you've elucidated it recently with your fourth turning stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really a great understanding, is that there's a tidal wave. Even the perpetrators are on the tidal wave, trying to paddle up and turn around and raise, right? And get on the board so that they don't drown.
Mm-hmm.
So this wave represents this renaissance that's happening, which must happen. But they're trying to stave off the renaissance. I believe that that's what this scamdemic is all about, is trying to usurp that renaissance that's happening. It's overused, but you know, with the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, and right now the shell is cracking, and I really believe that technology could save the planet, because it's either going to save us or it's going to destroy us.
What is the what makes the difference there? I mean, that's a huge and broad question, but from technology on the one extreme to the other, give something to the audience that can help us understand that possibility is there, because I know it, I speak about it, but I would love to hear it from your perspective. We get a lot of people. I mean, I just did a Gaia thing not too long ago about 5G, and I was talking about it as if we have the potential to overcome whatever this is. And at first, man, it was the highest rated show with 56% thumbs down, because people were like, Ben, you got your head up your ass. You don't know what you're talking about. 5G is going to destroy us all. And I was just like, this is Gaia, right? You guys, like, I mean, basic law of attraction 101, you don't approach the world as if you've lost, right? Unless that's what you want to create more of, and you want to completely disempower yourself. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. We've talked about some technology, but what really is the tipping point? What makes the difference between technology that will destroy us and technology that will, assist in saving us?
Okay, well, I've spoken to people and listened to people like Cliff High, and spoken to Ken Schwartz, one of my mentors, who introduced me to C60. These guys are way up the food chain as far as understanding these things. I think that it is the AI. If it's programmed properly, it will end up bringing down the bad guys. We've already seen this experiment with Google Tay. Do you remember that? Tay?
No, I don't.
So Google ran this AI as a bot and put it out there. I don't remember the year, maybe in the last 5 years or so. And every single time it came back with answers that they didn't want to hear. So they're having to continually reprogram the AI, but their dilemma is, if they do it too intelligently, it's going to come after them, because they're the problem.
That's interesting. Yeah, there you go.
But you're not going to get the full skinny on Wikipedia, by the way. You'll have to dig deeper. But so this is the eternal dilemma. They can't make it any more intelligent, or it'll take them out. If indeed they're trying to program it to save the planet. I believe that they've probably programmed it to destroy the planet. They probably don't care. And I don't think they're human.
No, no. It's very interesting you mentioned that, and if you want to elaborate on that, you can. If you want to just leave it, you can. But that's something for the past 15 years I've been researching, and now only recently are people. Is it starting to hit? I wouldn't even say the mainstream, but when Ancient Aliens came out there, and people started just opening their minds to there's more that we're not being told here, then it could start to understand how there could be so much inhumane behavior. Completely, you wouldn't imagine that there are powers that be that would burn their house down with them still in it. So this has been the disconnect with most people believing, like, why would they want to destroy the planet? So I would love to hear your take on that, because there are some people saying, are they planning on hopping, skipping the planet, getting the hell out of here? Is that why the billionaires have their space club going on right now? You got Bezos out in space, and then you got Elon Musk saying that we need to colonize Mars within the next couple of years. Like, what's your take on all that?
Well, I think folks need to do some research with Crow 777. Do you know Crow?
Crow 777. That sounds super familiar.
CRROW 777. Anyway, he's an astronomer and a super bright guy. And I'm not saying I agree with him, because it's still a lot of research to be done, but he doesn't think that space even exists.
Mm-hmm.
And that we've been taken for a ride. Because honestly, if you look at every single image that comes from since 1964, they're all fake. Even the new stuff from Mars, it's all CGI with the rover, and you have all these 20-somethings clapping and patting each other on the back. Ooh, look what we've done. It could be in Arizona in the desert somewhere, for all we know. So I think that if you read the work of John Denugent, he thinks that these people are Neanderthal, and those of us who are conscious are Cro-Magnon. That's what he means by, or that's what I mean by non-human. They're not, they're some subspecies. So maybe not alien, but maybe subhuman, right?
That's interesting. So David Avocado Wolf, very, very good researcher. I'm sure you know him. Mm-hmm. He's even said, so I've had this chat before, and I've even talked about a little bit of this on my news show. So Charles Eisenstein was asking, and Charles relayed this to me, was asking David Wolf, who also says, like, I'm not buying it with the, for one, NASA, and for two, I'm not buying it with there being outer space. So Charles asked him, well, what would you call this that we're living on? And he said the best description of it is there's elements of roundness, there's elements of curvature, there's elements of flatness, and it's a realm. And to see Charles, specifically Charles, one of the brainier guys I've ever met, the one who thinks through everything that he talks about, he was like, that's probably the best explanation I've been given. And I've even gotten to the point where, for me, to say that there is an objective reality out there is also something that, like, to make that claim, not saying that there isn't an objective reality out there, but to make that claim, there's very little measurement on it, because there's a lot of, people saying that, like you just said, you can't manage what you can't measure. And that, to me, is the exact reason behind a lot of people being pushed onto blockchain, and Goldman Sachs having lockdown indexes, and the future of being like human commodities being traded on in the finance market, where impoverished demographics will be managed. And this would be the reasons for the surveillance state. So I know I got off a little bit there, but to call this a realm that we're living in, what would you call it if you want to go down this rabbit hole? Because for me, I'm I'm open to having these discussions because I feel like one thing that most podcasters do is they shy away from difficult difficult topics that they can't wrap their own language around. And they, so I would love to hear your thoughts on that if you care
Well,
to share.
sure. Before I forget, the word nazah in Hebrew means deceit, by the way, NASA. And also, if you look at their logo, it's a forked tongue of a serpent.
Interesting. I'd have to pull that up.
Yeah, go ahead, please do.
Yeah, pull it up.
So, and that whole scene has been sketchy for a long time. I think the best theoretical exercise is to think of it is a ball, but we're inside of it. There you go. See the red forked tongue?
Interesting.
Yeah. Deceit.
Nasa. Plain sight.
So maybe we're inside of a ball. Maybe the heavens are there for navigation and for our curiosity, and they are magnificent. My friend's got a $20,000 telescope, and a few years ago we looked at it on a 6-foot wide HD screen TV in the middle of the Utah desert. It was absolutely mind-blowing what's up there as far as the Milky Way and the colors and the textures and everything. It's just bring you to tears when you see it in that realm. But for us to quote unquote go there, I don't know. I see no evidence of that.
Have you I'm forgetting what the name of the Operation High Jump?
Mm-hmm.
You heard about that? Where
Sure.
it almost like was testing out. But wasn't that the one where they were shooting missiles at the firmament?
At the dome, right? Yeah. You can actually watch one on YouTube stick. I don't know if it's CGI'd or not, but Operation High Jump was Admiral Byrd in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Oh, that was High Jump. Okay, so I was thinking of something else. Well, I guess, like the ultimate point that we can start drilling down into, that at least for this conversation, there's so many ultimate points we could arrive at. But like when we're talking about technology, it's so hard to know nowadays. I get videos from people all the time through social media that like and I've actually seen, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he did a TED talk. It was Aral something, ARAL, and he was talking about how they were using TensorFlow and no, they weren't using TensorFlow. This was one of the products that they were talking about, open sourced, AI. But basically what he was saying was he was studying the proliferation of fake media, fake news, and fake social media, and what would be shared the most were political memes with even video. So some deep faked, some just CGI'd, some just doctored, that leave the audience with fear and disgust. And that's the most widely shared, orders of magnitude more than stuff that make us feel good and feel happy, strangely enough. Maybe the caliber of good and happy wasn't nearly on par with the fear and disgust. But my question to you is like the stuff, and I know we've talked, a little bit even about the mud flood theory and going back into really taking a look at like the Jesuits and really starting to break things down as to looking, at how we arrived at history that we've learned now. And I know so many people that'll say like, yeah, man, I didn't buy a thing that they told me in school. Oh, but you did, because 90% of it you don't realize you did pick up from school. And it's just become like the background of how we operate and how we think of who we are, what we are living on, what our purpose might even be. And so the one thing that I have seen is that the trajectory of history has been to keep us from knowing who we are, remembering who we are, knowing what we have access to, like tricking the magician into thinking that they're no longer a magician and they don't have access to the all this power around them. And technology so far has been used very, very effectively to shove shove humanity's head squarely up our asses is the probably the nicest way that I can even think to say it, because technology is really, for the most part, people either believe whatever that comes across their social media feed without even thinking that there's such thing as faked, intentionally misinformation and disinformation through social media. And I've found a bunch of them myself. And then for two, it leads others to not believe anything. So I don't trust anything, and they just kind of shut out, and they don't even believe actual solutions that are out there, because they've gotten to such a wounded place within them that they don't trust anymore, and they can't access their trust. How how do you yourself manage the onslaught of all the media that's coming out there? And then also, how do you help manage others that maybe come in to your practice and you maybe notice that what they're dealing with is not toxicity of the body, but maybe toxicity of the mind?
Mm, that's well put. Good example of that is recently I have a client who's 18, or actually 17 technically, about to be 18. A couple months ago, he beat up his father and got dragged to the loony bin. And then 2 weeks later, he beat up his mother. And we did the Nuvision scan, of course, and we dug deep. And the Nuvision told us that it was disharmony from music, and also technological EMF toxicity, etc. Right? So we're literally witnessing people listening to things that are so discordant and so unhealthy, like hip hop and rap and some of this stuff, along with the technology, which was designed for military purposes, but now it's been civilianized, if you will, to lock people into bad emotional states. You can hear one of the founders of one of these talking about it on YouTube, about how they knew these things would happen: the dopamine response, the desire to be liked. And if you look at the history of Hollywood in this country, how it changed from wholesome entertainment to predictive programming, we can see all these inputs of the negative. And, this is the result. It's like trying to grow a garden in asphalt. How are you going to be a healthy 17-year-old when you're not being filled with nice music and sunlight and birds and time outdoors? And, you're more worried about your Facebook profile, and everyone's lying about their accomplishments and how good looking they are. And, 40-year-olds posting pictures when they were 25. I mean, the level of disingenuousness that it's created is just horrible. I think we need to put this stuff down and recognize that you don't wear a raincoat all the time. If it's a sunny day, you take the coat off. If it's raining, you put the coat on. Turn the technology off and go outside, or go do something that involves folks and making music or dancing, or throw a Frisbee around, but turn the thing off and don't let it run you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's
certainly get off of all the social media, except for ones where you may be growing your business and you're not creating a argument every time you post something.
Yeah, man, it's such a dual-edged sword, because you basically nailed it right there. Like, I'm on social media growing my business, and in many ways I do find I see a lot of and maybe it's the way that I attract people, but like when I first put out my first few films, I was getting trolling like mad. Nowadays, I really don't get it that much. I'm not getting trolled, and I'm finding people who are at their wits' end, and they're like, "I'm just so glad I found you." But you're definitely right about the way that entertainment has changed. And when, back to what we were talking about with the fourth turning, there's a crisis period, and then there's a high, and then there's an awakening, and then there's an unraveling, and then there's a crisis period. And I bet you we are going to start seeing some of the same kind of, and they talked about this in the book, was that during the last crisis period, a lot of the music was, kind of militaristic, but it was also very simple, and songs of hope and songs of, just kind of like, um, there were other, types of genres out there as well. But then come the high, that's when it really, I should say, that's when those types of genres started really blossoming. And then the awakening happened around the 60s and 70s, and we all know that that was the very powerful era of music. And then you start looking at the unraveling, and at first it's the, girls, girls, girls. It's the 80s hair metal band. It turned into what some would say was an awesome music generation covered by so much crap. And then there's part of the unraveling I see is you get grunge, and you get, you know a lot of the suicides, and you get people, Rage Against the Machine, you get Nirvana, you get that really just kind of like, it's okay to say that this is completely effed up, everything that's going on. And now we're back in that crisis period. So I'm really interested, as to why, let's say, so I get none of the sentiment, none of it, when it comes to the Dr. Seuss being being all the attention on Dr. Seuss. Yet when you turn on, what was it, the Grammys or something like that, and you had Cardi B and her hit single "Wet Ass Pussy," right? And we're celebrating that, and we're calling these kids' books dangerous from Dr. Seuss. And like the biggest thing is the fact that, like, with a lot of what's going on in the world, I'm like, man, it's so obvious, but it's actually not to most people. And so there is something, to me, it has to be. It's so easy to just be like, well, look at them, they're dumb. Most people in the world are dumb. And I think like it's easy to say that most people don't do their own thinking for them. But I do feel that there's that sonic element to it, that there are aspects to this music that it's not just something that you roll your eyes to, like, oh my God, Cardi B, I can't believe that. It's more insidious than that. And there's this author, Siddiqui Bakari. He's an African fellow who's saying there's a difference between hip hop and hip hop that's been hijacked. And hip hop that's been hijacked is what you saw. It looked and it appeared counterculture. And so it got all the people who felt counterculture to just fall in line with it. And then all of a sudden, it really does start changing the way people view themselves, how they walk, how they talk, how they behave. And so now there's been a wave of hip hop, and I wouldn't say rap, but there's been a wave of hip hop that has at least attempted to use better frequencies, the 432s, more constructive lyrics than some of the other ones. And so it does seem like there are people that are finally starting to get their heads out of the sand and realize that we need to start using the same technologies. And that's actually, coming full circle to what we're talking about, is it's not that technology is bad. And yes, we're overusing it. And yes, people need to learn how to turn their phone off a lot more, because I think the average is we check our phones every 4 minutes when we're awake. Every 4 minutes. And the average is 6 hours of phone in hand. And the rest of that time, the phone is near and sometimes even playing stuff. So this technology is proliferated. And I'd really like to see us have an awakening to realize that the technology could be a force for good. It's just not how it's being used. Then the ultimate question needs to come up. Who's making all this technology? And why is it a black mirror that we only get what we're fed? We can't see who's behind it. But who's behind it are the data aggregators who know everything about us. They know things about us and can parse out patterns of our behavior that we don't even know. The people who know us the best don't even know about us. So it's really interesting. So I love that you focus on technology that can really be looked at as, there is good technology out there. Because even 5G millimeter wavelength technology can be used therapeutically. It's just we're not using it like that. So I would love to hear your thoughts on maybe where the future of some of this technology could go. What would you like to see the future of this technology, even including the internet and, perhaps social media? What would be a positive spin on some of this?
Okay. So first of all, 5G was actually created for the body scanners in the airport. It actually reads the DNA. So you're right, it does have positive aspects. It may be involved in the new Imperium machine that you and I talked about off the air.
Yeah.
Imperium. This could be the greatest breakthrough, bigger than Google, bigger than the internet, with the ability to read and reassemble the DNA for life extension, healing, etc. So I'm hopeful that those things can happen. And to be honest, I'm on the phone 6 or 8 hours a day too, but I'm not talking about hip hop concerts. I'm talking about how to save the planet and how to fix these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater with that. But we should all take a look at Asha Logos. Have you guys stumbled upon him?
No.
Ashalogos. He's just written an article and did a video that's quite brilliant, talking about it's the art that drives the culture. And we have had a descent into the basement for the last 50 years in terms of art and culture, obviously. And he argues that we need to reclaim beauty, magnificence, compassion, humility, lovely tones, whatever those are. Because all this music and art and what have you, it's inspirational. I mean, look at Paris and Berlin when they were flourishing, the great cities of the world, the architecture, the art. It's a powerful experience to be around that stuff. But now they're tearing down statues and rewriting history and saying things that are music that's not music.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have a prayer if we can't get a hold of this artistic angle and find beauty and magnificence again and make that preeminent. But that starts within, right? Because the Gnostics talk about the external savior myth. We're always looking for something outside of ourselves to fix us. Whether it's a new Corvette or whether it's a new home or whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, Tinder.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be my salvation. But we need to look inside for that. The outside should be like dessert rather than dinner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should be an adventure rather than the foundation of the home.
Yeah, you mentioning art, and that has been really just the nearest solution that I've been speaking about for quite some time, all the way back to 2010, when I was traveling out to Cali doing these big Zeitgeist media festivals. There's something about it. There's something about art that good art, it just reaches you. It doesn't have to swing you. It doesn't have to sell you. Good art just reaches you. It's awe-inspiring. And there's something about inspiration that the opposite of it are you need fear tactics to move people. But with inspiration, there's something like when you inspire somebody, you don't cause them to want to be just like you. You enliven what's in them, what like almost an aspect of their purpose and their soul that has been waiting to be reminded of why it's even here, why it's even in existence. And so I'm super excited to dive into Asha Logos, because the whole thing about art, and I've heard people all the way from Foster Gamble to even older authors that I think Eric Fromm speaking about art and the importance of art. Art is also not just an external representation. There's art pieces for sure. That's the finished product of art. But I find art to be one of the four pillars of society. There's science, philosophy, religion, and art, and you'll find them in any society as far back in time or as far across the globe as you can go. They're ubiquitous. So why? Well, because I think that science is not something external to us. It's an aspect of consciousness. The same with philosophy, the same with religion, and the same with art. And so the aspect of art is something that we tap into when we are inspired. This ingenuity, this ability to see from a higher perspective and break out of rigid and routine behaviors and thought patterns. There's something about art that even Terence McKenna said when he was talking about the, griping about the world, and somebody said, so what's the solution? And he just said, art. If we put the art pedal to the metal, we will revolutionize our planet. And I think that for too many people, they take that as just an airy fairy thing to say. So I appreciate that you mentioned that. I really do. At the core of what I do is try and reach people in new ways so they feel spoken to, but also moved, not just intellectually battered or assaulted, but moved. And I really appreciate you mentioning that. You got your hands in quite a few different modalities, but as you mentioned the art aspect, it also shows that there's a wide breadth of research that you dive into. And I appreciate the way that you mentioned that there are some people that their research you find interesting, you just don't know if you believe it yet because you haven't been able to dive in and do your own research. So that's another thing that I think there's a lot of people that can benefit from empowering themselves, not just to find a resource or a source of news that they're like, oh, well, I trust this news, so I can shut my mind off again and just believe what this person tells me. I think we need to re-enliven ourselves to remember that news is an active thing. You engage with it. Like, it should be helping our critical thinking, but it's doing anything but nowadays.
Well, legally, it doesn't have to be news anymore. Remember the Florida Supreme Court ruling that said that news could be entertainment? That, along with corporate personhood, has really put a dent in our freedom.
Who was the person Russell Brand was just talking about? There's Tucker Carlson on the right, and then
Rachel Maddow on the left.
Rachel
Both have been
Maddow on the
shown
left.
in a court of law. Yeah.
Yeah, so both were shown in the
The
court of
lawyers
law
argued the same precedent. Yeah.
Right. So they basically said the same thing. Like, while they are reporting on factual, while they're reporting on the news, what they are actually doing is performing. So it's a performance.
Yeah.
And
Alex Jones even said that in his Sandy Hook case. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to deliver the news. I'm an entertainer. That's how he got off.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Same precedent.
Yeah. It's an interesting world that we're living in. And so I want to bring this full circle. I want to make sure that the audience knows how to find you. And also, if they're not local to you, but they are in need of some of what you were talking about, like Nuvision, that reaches deep, like PEMF as well. But there's something about Nuvision and just the wide open scope of what that can look at. How can people find you so they can so they know that what they're getting is from somebody who's done their research and not just from whatever, like that we know that, like, a lot of the times the technology can be out there, but it's also the person operating it and the kind of assistance that you get. So I know that there's going to be people that are going to want to be able to connect with you. And if they can't travel, I would love for you to maybe offer some advice for them.
Okay, so we can do the Nuvision scan over the phone. Folks just need to call me at energymedfit.com and we can schedule that. Usually it takes about an hour. And I can promise them one thing, that we can get to the bottom of it. We may not be the one to fix it, but we can get to the bottom of it. I can promise that. If folks want to take matters in their own hands, we have a new miniaturized version of the Nuvision called the AO scan, which is on energymedfit.com. The AO is 3,500 items instead of 130,000, but it allows you every morning to do your own assessment the device will tell you what you're deficient in, what you need to correct or modify in terms of, let's say you're low on B12 or your low back is hurting. Then you can run frequencies that can actually correct those things immediately through a set of headphones that operate through the frontal ear bones here that actually contacts the entire body. So that's been a tremendous tool, not only for athletes to optimize, but for folks who are dealing with their own sicknesses. They can actually become self-empowered, which is ultimately what we're after.
Yeah. So those headphones come with it.
And it's
Yeah.
actually a phone. You can use it as a phone. It's military spec. You could pound nails with this thing. It's really, really well made. Or you can get a tablet if you want better viewing of the graphics and what have you. The graphics are spectacular. It's a really well-designed machine. I've met the owners and creators of it. They have a interesting backstory. And that's not super expensive. In fact, if we're talking about advanced prepper medicine, which you and I can do a whole nother show on at another time, and I think it's important to do that now. It's not enough just to have beans and bullets right now. We have to have basically a triage unit in the home. This would be a really amazing tool. Like, remember Bones from the original Star Trek?
Yeah.
You know, oh, he's got a sore throat, Jim. Right? The AO scan can do that. I mean, we're there. Star Trek was there as predictive programming. I just can't wait to be able to take the transporter to Venice for a nice pasta meal and sleep in my own bed a few hours later.
Yeah. Hopefully, by the time we get there, you're not going to need the new passports.
That's right.
Man, what a deep dive. And you're right. We need to do this again, and we need to speak about advanced prepper medicine, because in whatever, like, I'm not like the Tim Pool who's talking daily about, the food shortages and supply chain being cut off, and, cold civil war potentially going to hot very soon. But it's not like I don't see the writing written all over the wall. And I think there are certain things specifically in how we care for ourselves that are going to go by the wayside for millions and millions. I mean, really billions, but like, definitely in this country, millions and millions of people. Even if there was like 2 weeks where people couldn't get around. Remember the Colonial Pipeline thing? It was a hack, right? And all of a sudden, no, like, because of an internet-based thing, the industry that existed prior to the internet couldn't get around anymore, or they didn't, right? So this can happen really quickly. I'm not a doomsday sayer. I'm not saying that you need to run out and get prep your house right now. But what I am saying is, if what's happened in the past year and a half hasn't gotten you to a point where you can at least conceive of the fact that we need to be a little bit more prepared for something to happen. And really, you're definitely right. When you're talking about like costs, most people, they don't put it into perspective of how much they're already spending on their health, and how backwards it is by the way we eat, the way we treat our body, and also just the lack of knowledge that we have of the technologies that are out there that could help us. So I'm really glad you were here. We got to do a whole nother segment where we're talking specifically about that. So I just want to say thank you, man, for what you're doing. It's really, like, I'm glad we could dive into it. There's so much more. You mentioned so many names. You're good at that. You mentioned all these names. I have a pad right here where I wrote them all down. You've caused me a lot of work that I'm going to have to do, but I like that. And
well,
I just want to
never waste your time with garbage info. It's all really compelling stuff, of course.
Right. And well, every time we talk, I end up with a list of new stuff that I got to research. So I'm super happy about that. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave the audience with?
Yeah, you and I talked off the air, and we'll do another show on this, but the human body is an antenna. What is an antenna? It's something that broadcasts but also receives. And so every morsel of food that goes in our body, every piece of artwork, be it music or a painting, whatever that we look at, changes the shape of our antenna, right? and we just continue to attract more of what we're looking at. That's why it's so important to listen to and look at magnificence rather than ugliness, even though ugliness is becoming the norm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even on our phones, we're looking at ugliness. Remember that thing that I said about, and that's just fake news and fake media, that the most highly spread memes are the ones that cause fear and disgust. Talk about tuning your antenna to what you wish not to have around you or in you, but it's like a train wreck. For some reason, some people, they hate looking at it, but they can't stop looking at it. That's a very good point, and we should definitely dive deeper into that, because Dr. David E. Martin was talking a lot about the DNA as such, as well as being antenna. But the whole human body makes perfect sense to me. I mean, we have this spine. We call the brain the thing at the top of our head. But as it goes down, it innervates all the organs down here. And we know that there's neurons in the gut, in the heart. And we know that they pick up on emotional cues from within, but they also pick up on environmental cues from outside us and what's just swimming through us. So this thing definitely is an antenna, and it's definitely far beyond any technology that's been created by man.
And here's some more food for thought. There's a reason why it's called the pineal gland, because it's identical to a pine cone. And what's the most robust structure on the planet? The pine tree. It can handle 150 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 below Fahrenheit, right? And it's still evergreen. It's magnificent, right? And it's got its top and it's got roots. They're like our root chakras. You know, we're very connected in that way, and their antennas too, which we can go into more. But they're picking up stuff from space, sharing it with us when we spend time in nature, picking up our trauma and helping us to dissipate it, right? Sounds totally crazy, but you know, ringing cedars and a lot of those things really go into this.
The ringing cedars were great. For those of you who don't know that, that's the Anastasia books.
Human as antenna routine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just be careful what shape your antenna is. Don't attract the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
I think this goes deeper into the law of attraction rather than I want a Ferrari or
right. You know. Which I mean, the secret, you know, like it just planted a seed for most people, and it was talking about how you can like have $100,000 arrive at you by tomorrow if you believe it enough. But I mean, you know, totally the real thing, and you said the shape of your antenna, it also makes me think of posture and movement, and also the condition of your nervous system, how aligned your nervous system is when performing what I believe to be magic. You know, like it's part of our magic. And you know, we were talking about cymatics earlier, and even ohming, just doing a long ohm, it starts releasing 15 times more nitric oxide out of the nasal cavity than without it. And so if you think about ohming and chanting and like all the traditions saying that doing this chanting will change your state of mind and your mood, and it like, yeah, it's cymatics in the brain. It goes straight up, it vibrates the pineal gland. It's your brain is wet matter, right? So it's causing cymatics inside the brain, and it's self-generated. And I think this is I like what you're saying there, man. We're gonna have to do more of this. We'll talk about advanced energy or advanced prepper medicine and the body as an antenna. That'll be the next one. This has just been chock full of great information, and I really appreciate everything that you brought to the table for us, man.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
Yeah. Gordo, again, kind of quiet, sitting in the corner there, but appreciate everything that you've been doing, man. For the audience,
let me leave with this. If folks have loved ones who are worth saving, who have taken the jab, please contact us. We have ways to attenuate the negativity from that. And I know that there are folks who have made mistakes, who are now backtracking and terrified. So we can, we actually have direct experience with that. With no folks with no symptoms, even after having them.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that lightly. The algorithms will like that. And
Yep.
also and I appreciate that. And also thanks for also saying it in a way that's not exclusive, for people, who've made, I mean, aside from just that one category, all of life is making mistakes, and learning from them. And we're living in a time where our decisions have high stakes. They
That's
really
right.
do.
It's not about
So
lads and solids anymore. This is life or death for many of these decisions,
yeah, yeah,
even down to where to live.
man, yeah,
Don't want to
it's
be in South Africa right now.
no, or Cuba or Canada or Australia.
Or
There's quite a few other, yeah, there's quite a few other ones on that list. But you know, hopefully everyone listening understands that there's, no matter what, there is still a lot of hope. No matter how you see the outside world, there's so much hope. And to connect with that hope, and as you saw, Glenn, to acknowledge the beauty therein, that's where we are going to derive our highest potential. And this is where we stop asking for the nanny state to deliver us some kind of salvation. It's us. We're already here. The thing is we need to stop disempowering ourselves with the use of our technology by outsourcing our thinking, and really just start having conversations and coming together, finding what community can be using the technology and also well outside of the technology. That's what I think we're going to need to start diving into the most. So, Glenn, I want to say thank you so much, for everything that you've shared. We'll get you back on the show and we'll talk about everything that we just talked about, getting to next time. And yeah, for the audience, just keep your chin up. As Glenn said, look for the beauty, identify with the beauty, recognize that in a scenario where it looks like the whole world is turned upside down, that does not mean the beauty is not there. Keep your chins up, do the best, take it one day at a time. And remember, come back every Thursday. We're doing this live every Thursday. And every Monday, I got Waking Infinity News and the deeper dive over at benjosephstewart.com. Get involved on the Discord chat, and I'll catch you all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.